Okay guys, this is the fourth and final module in the weight bearing series. We finally made it. Okay, now every kid is different, and so your child has his or her own unique needs that are being addressed individually with the weight bearing program that's been outlined for you. But what we're going to cover is, we're going to cover the basic concepts involved in why we want you to be so particular about your weight bearing program, or to do it so frequently, or whatever the parameters are that we've set for you. So in order to talk about that and see if we can clarify that a little bit better, I've brought a model with me. You're probably wondering what this thing is sitting next to me here. Basically, this is just a model that I'm going to use to show you the difference between an alignment scenario that we like as compared to an alignment scenario that might not be quite as ideal. So the right leg here is actually, obviously, the good leg. And you can see I put some arrows on it to represent the forces. And in this case, the forces line up nicely and nice long vertical lines. If I turn it sideways, you can still see, well, if I can get it turned here, you can see those nice linear relationships. And so in this case, when this child comes into a weight-bearing position, the forces go up and down. And you can kind of think of this like a building, and that this like the first floor and the second floor and the third floor, and they're kind of stacked right on top of each other, and in a nice linear fashion, so your building is nice and sturdy. Now, probably if you're in a weight-bearing scenario, you may not have an ideal alignment situation, or you may not have an ideal situation for other reasons. And so we've asked you to put your child in either like a device, a standing device, or we've given you some sort of equipment or some sort of program that we want you to implement, so that we can start to increase the amount of weight bearing, and more importantly, increase the amount of good weight bearing that your child is experiencing. So in order to talk about what things we want to change, I've set this leg up to be the less desirable leg. Now, I've introduced some angular forces here. Your child's leg might not look like this, but this is just going to basically go through the general concept of what can happen when some of those forces start to not look quite as nice as they did on this other side. So what I did was I took this leg and I introduced some rotation and some bending, and to kind of simulate either contractures or some changes in skeletal structure over time that might have been introduced because of some problems that this child had. And so we're going to imagine that this leg can't be straightened out, that this is what we have. And so one thing I want you to mention before we go into actually putting this leg on the ground to let it be weight bearing, is that I want you to appreciate that we actually have, because of some of the issues that I've created here, I've made this leg be functionally shorter than the other side. So if I were to straighten everything out like it was before, this bone and this bone are the same length, and this bone and this bone are the same length. And so ideally, if I have everything straight, these legs would be the same length. But because of these rotational and forces and these deviations, this leg appears to be shorter. So the reason I want to tell you that is because when I drop this leg down here in a second to meet the ground, you're going to see some influences on this other leg as well. And so in case your attention starts to drift the other direction and you're going, ooh, that leg looks like it might not be lined up as well as it was before, you are absolutely right. So as these lines start to drop down to the ground, I'm going to go ahead and drop this leg down now. As we move down here, you're going to start to see how these angular forces start to kind of relate to each other in a not so great way as compared to the other one. However, when I did drop this, you're going to see we did start to lose a little bit of that linear relationship that was on this side before. So the side point being made on that one, that even when you have a good structured leg on one side, if you have issues on the other side, the fact that that leg has to meet the ground in a certain way can affect what's happening on the good side. Okay, so disregarding this right leg for a minute, we're just going to look at this left leg. And as I bring this leg down to the ground, bring it a little closer so you can actually see, as I bring it down to the ground, bring this leg down to the ground, and I see this angular force, what we have to appreciate is that the stresses on this leg are now way different than the stresses are on the other leg. Remember that building we talked about with the first and second and third floors being stacked right on top of each other? I now have a first and second and third floor that are shifted back and forth across each other. So they're not as stable structurally as they were on the other side. So now we have forces introduced that are not exactly going to cue the modeling that the other leg would have cued before. So let's see if we can figure out a way to look at this a little more clearly. So I brought something else for you to look at, and no, it's not a bagel this time. I brought some pipe cleaners to represent. Now, remember we had our collagen strings and our paste to represent our bone structure. Well, I'm going to we're going to use a different model here, and these pipe cleaners are going to represent both the collagen and the mineral components that are making up the collagen matrix for the bone structure. And so I'm going to represent a bone with these four parallel structures here, and I'm going to introduce some vertical forces on that, just like we had in this leg, these up and down forces. Well, if this happens repeatedly, the bone is going to start to basically say, you know, I need to make sure I'm prepared for these forces because they keep repeating, and I want to make sure that I'm protecting and basically building up a nice strong building structurally so that it can withstand these stresses that we keep experiencing. So I'm going to represent that by adding some material, just like the bone might do, and I'm going to actually use these straws to simulate additional material being added. And so if I can get them to go on, there we go. So now when I introduce vertical forces here, I have a much stronger system. So just like in this one, I have the nice vertical forces. I basically created a nice general strengthening response, and now I can handle even more force up and down when, as the system goes out and moves and plays and goes through activities. So, but what about our other side, right? So let's get our four pipe cleaners. Okay, same deal. And now I'm going to introduce a rotational or a bending force, okay, that's kind of represented by this leg. So as I come in here with my pipe cleaners and I bend and rotate this system, I start to introduce kind of a focal pressure, a problem right here at this bend. And if I were going to come in here and stop this system or protect or help this system, what would I do? I would grab right at the bend, right? Well, that's exactly what happens, is we come in and the body says, you know what, I am concerned about that bend, and so I'm going to add some material here. If I can get this to go in here, I'm going to add some materials so that I don't have to worry about that bend as much. And so I'm going to introduce some extra material, and there we go. And actually I'm going to take this one out, and I'm going to put some more material right there so that it's nice and strong. So when that bend happens, okay, I have protected that area from that bending motion. Now you'll notice I couldn't get this strand in. I was meaning to get 3 in there, but we got 2 in there. That's good enough. But I have some strands that weren't actually incorporated in this process of building up and protecting this particular area. So basically the body was feeling like these were the points of stress, these were the pieces of the matrix that were getting the most stress and needed the most help. And they weren't feeling a lot of stress and pressure on these, so nothing happened to them. So they didn't feel a need to come in and actually make any additional changes to this part here. Now if over time this continues to happen and this continues to build up and these continue to be ignored, at some point the body's going to go, you know, these are really kind of extra. I'm really not using this material that much. And they may start to break this material down and release some of the, you know, the calcium or whatever into the bloodstream so that it can be used elsewhere, since it's really not in the body's mind being used for structure at the moment. So this is a very different situation than we had here where the body was basically saying, I need this information, I need it protected, I need it supported, and all 4 of the pipe cleaners remained protected and supported. So hopefully you can see that with this weight-bearing program now, if we take that idea and I introduce a weight-bearing system for this child, I'm going to start to try to do some things that are going to minimize some of those abnormal forces. So I want to try to come as close as I can to the system. I may not be able to recreate this exactly, but I want to do some things that are going to minimize those forces. So if I have a knee driving down and in, I may have something in my stander, or I may have an orthotic support system that comes in and protects medially and pulls things the direction towards me a little bit, so that I can sort of decrease that force a little bit. When I do, I'm going to decrease the chance that the body's going to feel that curve pressure as much, and I'm going to redistribute hopefully some of those forces in other places, so it'll be distributed more equally. I might come in and put an orthotic on the foot so I can control this foot and make sure it's loading as vertically as I can. So I'm going to try to make those floors line up the best that I can, and make sure that I have things not only cued for weight bearing, but cued for development as well. So that's basically what the weight bearing program is to come in and try to make sure that we are approximating the most ideal structural alignment that we can, so those forces and the stresses that are introduced are going to allow the bones to grow and develop and repair and protect themselves in the best way that we can get them in the best way possible, basically. So I'll get it out eventually. Okay, so hopefully now you have enough of a general concept that you can now tackle the internet and go out there and look up some of those things on weight-bearing programs, and maybe have a few of the sites with lots of detail make a little bit more sense now. And more importantly, I hope that what you feel like you can do is generate some questions now that you can take back to your therapist or your physician, so that you're going to feel more comfortable in executing that weight-bearing program for your child.